Hello. There was a 25-year-old English girl who suddenly disappeared during Christmas. The incident, after being investigated, had a huge impact on the British media industry. The main character of the story is Joanna Yates, born in April 1985 in Hampshire, England. Joanna was very intelligent and active since she was a child. After graduating from high school, she passed the entrance exam to Riddle College in England and obtained a degree in landscape architecture. She then continued her studies at the University of Gloucestershire in England. Joanna loved landscape design and hoped to work in this field in the future. By December 2008, Joanna was 23 years old and started her career. Not long after, she found a job as a landscape architect in Winchester. At this company, she met a colleague named Greg Reardon, who was 2 years older than her and also a landscape architect. They shared the same job and interests, so soon after meeting, they became more than just colleagues. In 2009, their company moved from Winchester to Bristol, a port city in the southwest of England and one of the 8 core cities in the UK. Typically, when a company relocates, many employees choose to quit due to distance and inconvenience. However, Joanna and Greg loved their jobs so much that they decided to move to Bristol together, which was about 150 kilometers away from their previous location. This city was entirely new to them. To prepare for their new life, the couple rented a small apartment near the company and started living together. After working there for a while, Joanna resigned from her job to further her career and joined a more progressive company. By October 2010, for convenience, they rented an apartment in an upscale residential area. They lived on the first floor and seemed very happy with their new place. They bought a lot of new furniture and decorations filled with hope for a bright future. However, no one could have predicted that just 2 months after moving in, a sudden tragedy would strike Joanna, leading to her disappearance. What exactly happened that day? Let's turn back time to December 17th, 2010 to learn more about the incident. December 17th, 2010 was a Friday. That day, Greg planned to visit his parents for the weekend and invited Joanna to come along. However, Joanna felt she wasn't ready for that, so she declined. Early in the morning, Greg left the apartment to visit his parents while Joanna went to work as usual. At 6 p.m., after finishing her workday, a few colleagues invited each other to a bar for the evening, and Joanna was also invited. Initially, she didn't want to go, but since her boyfriend was away and staying home alone would be boring, she accepted the invitation. At the bar, she told her colleagues that she didn't like this weekend because her boyfriend was away and she would have to be alone in the apartment. It seemed she was worried about something, but her colleagues didn't pay much attention. At 8 p.m., Joanna wanted to go home, so she said goodbye to her colleagues and left the bar. The bar was about 3 kilometers from their apartment, which would take about 30 minutes on foot. After leaving the bar, Joanna disappeared without a trace, and no one knew what had happened to her. On Sunday, December 19th, 2010, Greg discovered that the messages he sent to Joanna were not being responded to. He also called her several times but couldn't reach her, thinking she might just be busy. At 8 p.m., Greg returned to their apartment to prepare for the work week. The weather was extremely cold and it was still snowing outside. When he arrived at the apartment, he found the door unlocked. He quickly ran inside to look for Joanna but didn't find her, and their cat was also missing. In his confusion, he called her again and heard the phone ringing from the coat rack area. He checked and found her phone in one bag while her keys and wallet were in another bag. It was very cold outside and Joanna was not in the apartment, nor did she take her phone, wallet, and keys. Greg thought she might have gone to a nearby store to buy something and would return soon. By midnight, Joanna still hadn't come back, making Greg extremely anxious. He quickly called her parents to see if she was with them. Her parents said they hadn't seen her, and Greg explained the situation to them. Worried, Joanna's parents urged Greg to call the police immediately, and they also set off to her apartment to understand the situation. After receiving the report, the police quickly arrived at the apartment. After getting a preliminary understanding of the situation, they began collecting evidence at the scene. Shortly after, the police found a shopping receipt in the apartment for a pizza and 2 bottles of cider. The police saw 2 bottles of cider, one open and partially consumed and the other unopened. What puzzled them was that despite searching the entire apartment, they couldn't find the pizza. Most of the apartment's belongings were intact, and no valuable items were missing. There were no signs of disturbance in the apartment, so the police speculated that Joanna might have returned that night and then left again in a hurry, but it was unclear if she left voluntarily or was taken. The police then investigated her colleagues and learned that Joanna was in a bad mood that day. She felt down about being alone, but it was more worry than fear, and she left alone. Due to the lack of surveillance on the route, the police had to visit businesses along the route from the bar to her apartment to piece together her journey from surveillance videos. From the bar's surveillance video, the police saw Joanna leaving around 8 p.m., matching her colleagues' statements. At 8:10, she entered a shopping center, stayed briefly, and left without buying anything. At 8:24, she entered a small store and bought 2 bottles of cider. At 8:40, Joanna entered a Tesco supermarket to buy a frozen pizza. The police also found the shopping receipt in the apartment, and this was the last image of Joanna captured on camera. After leaving Tesco, she disappeared. The police then questioned her neighbors to gather more information. Next to Joanna's apartment was a young couple, and the man was named Vincent Tabak. That night, his girlfriend was in another city, so Vincent was the only one in the apartment. However, he said he didn't hear any unusual noises from the neighboring apartment that night. By December 21st, 4 days after Joanna's disappearance, her parents held a press conference to explain the situation to the public and hoped for their assistance. 2 days later, on December 23rd, they held another conference. Joanna's father stated, "I'm sure my daughter was taken after returning home. From the things left behind, I can't tell what happened. I am certain she would never leave everything at home and go out alone. She must have been taken by someone." He was certain of this because his daughter's keys, wallet, phone, and coat were all left in the apartment while the temperature outside was below freezing. In December, it is very cold, and his daughter would not likely go out without wearing her coat. Joanna's boyfriend and friends later created a website hoping that someone might provide more information. By December 25th, 2010, which was Christmas Day and the 8th day since Joanna's disappearance, a couple went out early in the morning to walk their dog. While walking near a golf course, they noticed something strange in the snow by the roadside. The heavy snowfall overnight had covered everything, so they couldn't see clearly what it was. Curiosity drove them to clear the snow, revealing a person lying in the snow. Terrified, they quickly called the police. When the police arrived at the scene, they discovered the lifeless body of a woman in the snow. They identified her as the missing woman from 8 days prior, Joanna. When found, she was fully clothed, but one sock was missing and there were several bruises on her body. The freezing temperatures and the snow covering her body caused Joanna to freeze, preventing the forensic team from starting their work immediately. The forensic report was released on December 28, 2010. A total of 43 injuries were found on Joanna's body, including bruises, cuts, and scratches on her neck. There were no signs of sexual assault and no traces of pizza were found in her stomach. Determining the exact time of death was difficult due to the severe freezing of her body. It was estimated that Joanna had died on the night of December the 17th, the night she left the bar. Following the report, the police upgraded the missing person case to a murder investigation and formed a task force to solve the case. The missing sock from the victim was suspected to have been taken by the perpetrator, but it was later found in her apartment. Forensic technicians collected all the evidence and found the DNA of an unknown man on the knee of Joanna's pants. The first person the police investigated was Greg, Joanna's boyfriend. They checked his phone and laptop but found nothing suspicious. Additionally, Greg was in his hometown during that time and his family provided an alibi, so he was cleared as a suspect. A young woman living near Joanna's apartment told the police that on the Friday night Joanna disappeared, she was having a party at a house near Joanna's apartment. During that time, she heard 2 screams around 9 p.m., a clue that caught the police's attention. At 8:40 p.m., Joanna left the Tesco supermarket about a 20-minute walk from her apartment, so 9 p.m. could have been the time Joanna encountered trouble. Another witness reported to the police that they heard a woman screaming for help one night but couldn't recall the exact day and time. Based on this information and the missing pizza, the police believed that Joanna was taken after she returned to her apartment that night. Since there were no signs of a struggle, the police concluded that someone might have knocked on the door and Joanna opened it, possibly for someone she knew or who had a key to her apartment. This led the police to shift their focus to the apartment owner Christopher Jeffries, a 65-year-old retired English teacher who had taught at a local university. To maintain an income after retiring, he rented out his apartment. The police also learned that Jeffries was very eccentric, preferred staying at home, and disliked going out. He was the landlord who rented the apartment to Joanna and Greg and had a key to their home. Additionally, since they knew each other, Joanna would have likely opened the door for him even if he didn't have the key. Jeffries lived in the same building complex. On the morning that Joanna's boyfriend left, they had said goodbye to each other at the door. It's possible that Jeffries overheard their conversation and knew Joanna would be alone for the weekend, leading him to target her. Based on this deduction, the police identified Jeffries as the prime suspect. Some British media did not miss this hot news. They not only reported on the case, but also described Jeffries as an eccentric old man. His image appeared on the front pages of newspapers, with some even labeling him as the murderer. Before the police could formally charge him, the media had already convicted him. Numerous reporters waited outside his house, following him wherever he went to get news and prevent him from fleeing due to fear of prosecution. At that time, Joanna's neighbor Vincent Tabak provided new information. He stated that the landlord Jeffries did not usually drive and his car was always parked downstairs. On the day Joanna disappeared, he noticed the landlord's car was parked differently than usual. In other words, Jeffries had driven his car on the night of December 17th. On December 30th, 2010, under public pressure, the police arrested Jeffries on suspicion of murder and brought him to the police station for questioning. After obtaining a search warrant, the police raided his home to collect evidence. Jeffries adamantly denied any involvement in the case, and the police found no valuable evidence in his house. British law allows the police to detain a suspect for up to 24 hours without evidence, and they must release them if no evidence is found. If the police are close to obtaining evidence, the detention period can be extended by another 24 hours. Jeffries' car was also carefully searched, but the police found no valuable evidence, so he was released after 2 days in custody. After releasing the suspect, the police continued to investigate and monitor Jeffries but found nothing. Eventually, the police believed that Jeffries had no connection to the case. In January 2011, a crime television program produced by the BBC was filmed at the crime scene to recreate the entire incident. This program attracted significant attention from local media, increasing the case's popularity and drawing more public interest. Within 24 hours of broadcasting, the police received over 300 leads, marking a major breakthrough in the case. Based on the provided leads, the police believed the perpetrator might have transported the victim using a large bag or suitcase. In the early morning of January 20th, 2011, the police arrested the neighboring engineer, 32-year-old Dutchman Vincent Tabak, for investigation. Following the media frenzy over the landlord Jeffries, the local media chose to remain silent and observe the situation. Tabak's arrest stemmed from an anonymous tip from a woman, but specific details were not disclosed. Vincent Tabak, born in the Netherlands in February 1978, earned a master's degree in architectural design and planning in 2003 and continued to pursue a PhD. After graduating in 2007, Tabak moved from the Netherlands to the UK for work, where he met his girlfriend. In June 2009, Tabak moved to this area, and by October 2010, Joanna and Tabak had moved into adjacent apartments. It was reported that Joanna and Tabak had never met before and did not know each other. After Joanna disappeared, Tabak traveled from the UK back to the Netherlands for Christmas and continuously followed the reports on her case. During this time, he contacted British police by phone, claiming that landlord Jeffries had driven out on the night Joanna went missing. However, strangely, he did not mention this crucial information during his initial police interview. By December 31, 2010, British police had to fly to Amsterdam, the capital of the Netherlands, to investigate Tabak. During their conversation, Tabak repeatedly and unintentionally asked the police about Joanna's autopsy results. This behavior made the police very suspicious, and subsequently, Tabak was arrested. Upon their return, the police discovered some photos on Tabak's computer featuring a girl in a pink shirt who looked very similar to Joanna. Joanna had also been wearing a similar pink shirt when she disappeared. Tabak had searched for terms related to decomposition and local garbage collection dates. The police extracted Tabak's DNA and compared it to the DNA found on Joanna's body after she went missing. After being arrested, Tabak denied any involvement in the case and changed his initial statement, claiming that on that night he had gone to a local store. The police checked the surveillance footage and indeed saw Tabak in the store, but he did not buy anything seemingly appearing in the footage deliberately to create an alibi. However, the police could not exclude Tabak from suspicion, as even if he had gone out that evening, he still had enough time to commit the crime upon returning. Therefore, this was not considered an alibi. Tabak argued with his lawyer that the police had deliberately taken DNA evidence to conclude the case and continuously asserted his innocence. By May 2011, Tabak unexpectedly changed his statement and admitted to attacking Joanna, but he claimed that his actions were a mistake and not intentional. However, the police rejected Tabak's fabricated defense. On October 4, 2011, the case was tried at Bristol Crown Court, where Tabak pleaded guilty to manslaughter, claiming that he had accidentally done it by mistake. However, the prosecutors argued that this was a premeditated crime and not just a case of manslaughter. The forensic report also indicated that the victim had a total of 43 injuries, including many cuts and bruises, with some wounds being more than 30 centimeters deep. These injuries suggested that Joanna had died after enduring a period of pain. Tabak recounted that on that night he met Joanna and she flirted with him and invited him to her apartment for a drink. He confessed that he tried to kiss her but was rejected and she screamed for help. Seeing her frightened and panicked, he held her neck with his hands for about 20 seconds, and when he released her, he realized she had died. The trial lasted over 20 days and was adjourned for 2 days until October 26th. The jury finally returned a verdict of 10 votes in favor and 2 against, and the court sentenced Tabak to life imprisonment with no parole for 20 years. At the end of the case, landlord Jeffries sued 8 media agencies for defamation. He won the case and received a substantial compensation, causing 4 media outlets to go bankrupt. On Joanna's first anniversary, many local residents came to the church to pray and offer condolences to her family. Joanna's university graduation projects were also compiled and published. Her fate was unfortunate, as being alone made her very vulnerable and naturally exposed to danger. It is essential to be vigilant and protect oneself. In our lives, there are many things we have to trade off, some of which we consider worth it and others not. After each occurrence, we can draw valuable lessons, right? On January 3, 2014, in an old apartment building on Tonha Street, Zhoushan City, Zhejiang Province, China, a murder occurred. A man called the police to report that a crime had taken place in this rundown apartment. When the police arrived at the provided address, they found a collapsed apartment with the 2 victims' bedrooms in disarray. It appeared that the victims had been killed while sleeping. The crime scene was peculiar, as the male victim was found slumped on the bed, while the female victim was sitting on the floor leaning towards the bed. The female victim's right hand was still placed on the male victim's head, and there was a large dried pool of blood. Based on the scene, the police deduced that the male victim was attacked and killed before the female victim. However, the exact manner in which both individuals were attacked and killed remained unknown due to the chaotic and bloody crime scene. The bedside drawer had been pulled out, and the neatly folded blanket on the bed had been disheveled. The couple who were the victims had died from multiple stab wounds inflicted by a sharp object, possibly a knife. What surprised the police was the perpetrator's skilled use of the knife. The wounds and injuries on the victims' bodies indicated that they were caused by a sharp knife. Normally, when using a sharp knife, an attacker would stab the victim directly at a right angle. However, in this case, the assailant held the knife vertically and stabbed downward into the victims' bodies. One can imagine the way the perpetrator held the knife and attacked the victim, similar to how someone plants rice in a field. Holding the knife upright, they made long sliding wounds resembling a butcher slicing meat. The forensic report revealed that both victims had multiple similar stab wounds, primarily on their necks, chests, and backs. The male victim had the most stab wounds, with wounds on his shoulders, chest, and rib bones that formed long sliding cuts. However, the fatal wound was a stab through the neck, puncturing the carotid artery and causing severe bleeding, resulting in rapid death for the male victim. The female victim also died from 23 stab wounds, with a similar modus operandi. The fatal wounds were 2 deep stabs just below the breastbone, penetrating the heart and causing critical blood loss. At the crime scene, numerous playing cards were found scattered on the bed next to the male victim's body. Witnessing this scene, the police speculated that the crime may have resulted from a dispute during gambling. On the dining table in the living room, there was a bowl with leftover food, suggesting that the victims had finished eating but hadn't had a chance to clean up before the attack. However, what was strange was that in a house with a married couple, there was only one bowl on the table, as if only one person had dinner while the other was absent. The police suspected that the perpetrator entered the house and killed the male victim first, then hid and waited for the female victim to return before attacking and killing her near the bedroom door adjacent to the living room. The police also discovered a black leather handbag on the ground near the crime scene, which had been searched. The drawers and cabinets showed signs of being opened and rummaged through. However, according to the information from the victim's younger brother, who was also the first person to discover the crime, it seemed that only a sum of cash was missing from the remaining handbag and no valuable assets were lost. The bedrooms, living room, and kitchen were all intact, and furthermore, the front door of the house showed no signs of forced entry. From these clues, it could be determined that the perpetrator was someone acquainted with the victims or somehow gained access to the house. When questioned, the neighbors stated that they didn't hear any sounds of impact or cries for help until the victim's younger brother arrived at the scene, panicked, and screamed upon seeing his sister and brother-in-law lying in a pool of blood. At that moment, the neighbors rushed over upon hearing the scream, which further disturbed the crime scene. The technicians collected a total of 11 different footprints and 1 fingerprint, none of which belonged to the married couple. This fingerprint was found on another bowl at the crime scene. Through the investigation, the police learned that the male victim was Cao Hong Yang, and the female victim was Liu Ngok Fen. According to Fen's younger brother's account on that afternoon, he had called his sister several times, but no one answered. When he happened to pass by the area, he stopped by his sister's house and knocked on the door, but no one responded. Seeing that the door was unlocked, he pushed it open and witnessed the horrifying scene before him, as well as finding a footprint with a distinctive characteristic. It had a trace of blood. Because the victim's blood had not yet dried through analyzing the footprints, the experts determined that the pattern on this shoe print could belong to the Li-Ning brand, a domestic shoe brand in China. Since there were no signs of forced entry at the crime scene, the police deduced that the perpetrator might be someone familiar to the victims who committed the crime. The police launched an investigation into the social relationships of the two victims and conducted inquiries at the Li-Ning shoe store in Zhoushan City. However, purchasing shoes does not require personal information registration like buying train tickets or some other services, so investigating based on this information did not yield immediate results. This residential area only had one entrance in the neighborhood located on Tonha Street. Since it was an old residential area, the surveillance cameras were rudimentary and they hardly captured any images at night. Street lights were also scarce, so the police had to collect images from the surveillance cameras of residents on both sides of Tonha Street before turning into the residential area. However, Tonha Street had heavy traffic and a high volume of people passing by, making it time-consuming to carefully review the video footage from the cameras to find any leads. The female victim, named Liu Ngok Fen, was 38 years old and currently running a construction materials store. Besides her job, Fen's biggest hobby was playing online Caro or gambling. Therefore, despite her store having many customers, there wasn't much money because she had spent it on gambling. Due to her addiction to games, Fen still owed money to many people, including gambling debts. Along with that, her social relationships were also complicated. She had had over 10 lovers and encountered numerous troubles due to past love conflicts involving love triangles and quadrangles. The male victim, named Cao Hongyang, was 43 years old and currently worked as a warehouse manager for a company. His social relationships were simpler because he spent most of his time living in the company's collective housing due to work. However, on the night of the crime, he had returned home. According to the account of the victim's younger brother, the brother-in-law and sister had been separated for a long time due to numerous arguments and jealousy issues, but they decided not to divorce because they couldn't agree on the ownership of the house after the divorce. Therefore, Cao Hongyang continued to live in the company's collective housing area while Liu Ngok Fen lived in their old house. Yang would occasionally come home and stay for a few days before leaving again. At this point, the police discovered from surveillance videos around 21:04 on January 3rd that Fen appeared passing by the camera. The footage showed her carrying a handbag and a large bag containing various expensive items, as if she had just purchased them from a supermarket. The police noticed that it would take Fen approximately 5 to 7 minutes to walk from the spot where she appeared on camera to her house. Therefore, the time of the victim's death was definitely after 21:10 on the same evening. The police conducted an investigation and found that among Fen's acquaintances there was a person named Wang Wei Dian who worked as a technician installing and repairing solar energy systems. Furthermore, there was a special relationship between Fen and Dian. Due to his job, Dian frequently visited Fen's building materials store to purchase items. He had a respectable and well-groomed appearance. Although he was married, his relationship with his wife was somewhat strained due to various other issues in the family. After several meetings, the two of them began a secret relationship. However, 3 days after the incident, when the police came to question Wang Wei Dian about Fen, he claimed that they had broken up several months earlier. Nevertheless, telecommunication records showed that on the day of the incident, Dian had called and messaged Fen to arrange a meeting, which made the police suspicious. During the forensic examination of Liu Ngok Fen's body, the police discovered that a few hours before her death, she had engaged in sexual intercourse with a man. The DNA test on the semen sample revealed that the person involved was none other than Wang Wei Dian. Faced with this compelling evidence, Dian had no choice but to admit to the secretive and illicit relationship between him and Fen. He explained that he lied because he was afraid of arousing police suspicion. While there were no conclusive results from the trace investigation, the police found fingerprints of a neighbor living on the lower floor of the crime scene on a plate at the scene. This man's name was Zheng Cheng Mao, 48 years old, and he lived in the same building as the victim. Previously, Mao had been a pork trader and the meat butcher. The police suspected that the cut marks on the victim's body resembled the cuts made by a butcher while slaughtering pigs. It was possible that the perpetrator, being familiar with handling knives in his profession, left similar wounds. However, the search conducted at Zheng Cheng Mao's house yielded no useful information. The police discovered that one knife from Mao's set of 7 kitchen knives was missing. However, he insisted that he had broken that knife a long time ago and had not set foot in the victim's house. This was clearly a lie, as his fingerprints were found on the plate. What's even more surprising is that when the police asked about what he was doing around 21:10 on the evening of the incident, Mao and his wife provided completely contradictory answers. Mao claimed he was sleeping because his family had a habit of going to bed early, while his wife insisted that Mao was outside taking a walk at that time. During a deeper investigation, the police discovered that Zheng Chung Mao was also the secret lover of Liu Ngoc Fen. Therefore, finding his fingerprints in Fen's house was considered normal. However, Mao's footprints did not match the blood footprints at the crime scene, including both the shoe type and size. The police believe that shoe sizes are consistent, and if Zheng Chung Mao had disposed of his shoes after committing the crime, the shoe size at the crime scene should have matched his shoe size. As a result, after comparing the footprints, the police had fewer suspicions about Zheng Chung Mao's involvement. During the search for the next suspect, an unforeseen situation occurred. Zheng Chung Mao suddenly confessed that because of his romantic relationship with Fen, he had visited her house before the crime took place. About 2 weeks prior, while engaging in an affair, he was caught by Fen's husband at the scene. Mao voluntarily offered 500 yuan as compensation, but later he felt deceived and suspected that it might be a trap set by Liu Ngoc Fen and her husband to extort money from him. In a fit of anger fueled by alcohol, Zheng Chung Mao went to confront Fen's husband. During the confrontation between the two men, Mao unintentionally killed Cao Hongyang and Liu Ngoc Fen to protect the secret. However, the strange thing was that although Mao admitted to the crime of murder, his testimony about the details of the case differed significantly from the crime scene. Mao claimed that he often experienced forgetfulness and hallucinations after drinking alcohol. He even forgot the way back home and had to seek assistance at the police station. With no other options, the police suggested a psychiatric evaluation for Mao, and the result indicated that he had a mild mental disorder. While Mao was still confused about what to do next, the police received a report of a robbery and murder that occurred on Can School Street in Zhoushan City. A woman was stabbed and collapsed on the street, eventually dying on her way to the hospital. The forensic doctor discovered that the injuries on this victim had the same characteristics as the wounds on the two previous victims, a distinctive vertical knife cut. The victim was identified as Liu Xiaochan, 33 years old. The incident took place in a small alley on Can School Street while she was heading home and encountered the assailant. A resident on the second floor of the building above witnessed the entire incident. The resident heard cries for help from the staircase and saw Liu Xiaochan running westward through the neighborhood while being pursued by the attacker. During her escape, Liu Xiaochan attempted to elude the pursuer twice, but was eventually caught up to and stabbed, causing her to collapse in front of a pawn shop. The incident occurred around 10 p.m. and the alley was poorly lit, making it difficult for witnesses to clearly identify the suspect's appearance. The police collected images from nearby surveillance cameras and discovered a suspicious individual running on the street with both hands in his pockets. Upon reviewing the video of the murder of Mr. and Mrs. Cao Hongyang, they found a person who closely resembled the suspicious individual appearing on the previous case's footage on Tonha Street. This man appeared on the video at 9:10 p.m. wearing a light blue shirt and dark blue pants. He was also wearing white fabric gloves, but from certain angles, it could be seen that he was wearing prescription glasses. However, the person involved in the murder of the 33-year-old woman on the street did not wear glasses. In terms of height, physique, and hairstyle, both individuals were very similar, especially in their soft and somewhat feminine movements. This person was approximately 1.7 meters tall, wearing sports shoes, and appeared to be between 30 and 40 years old. The police continued to expand their collection of surveillance camera images from the previous case on the other side of the street. This time, they found an image of a man wearing blue clothes and glasses crossing the street at around 9:02 p.m. Based on the expected walking speed, he would arrive near the gate of the crime scene around 9:04 p.m. This is also the time when the female victim appeared there with a book in her hand, as mentioned earlier. Then at around 9:19 p.m., the man with glasses appeared again in the surveillance camera footage on the south side of the building, but he was absent from the camera for the 15-minute period. The police are trying to find out where he went and what he did before returning there. However, despite reviewing the suspect's video footage multiple times, the police have been unable to determine his identity. Due to the close proximity of the two murder scenes less than 3 kilometers apart, the police believe that the perpetrator must reside or frequent this area. During the investigation, a police detective had an encounter one evening while shopping with his wife. He came across a man wearing glasses who closely resembled the man in the surveillance video they had collected. Furthermore, the man was looking around as if searching for something. The police officer noticed that he was wearing a pair of sneakers from the brand Li-Ning. From this observation, the police officer became particularly suspicious of the young man in front of him. Luckily, being off-duty, the police officer was dressed casually. He proceeded with caution and continued to monitor the unfamiliar man in the darkness of the night. Under the dim streetlights, this man wandered into a deserted area in front of a nearby grocery store. Finally, the police officer succeeded in apprehending and capturing the suspect, and upon searching him, they found a knife. The arrested man's name was Chi Yong Ning, 40 years old, residing in Heechung Street, Zhoushan City. According to Chi Yong Ning's confession, he had been unemployed for a long time and had no money. Recently, out of boredom, he had a twisted idea to make money by means of robbery. As women were considered vulnerable, he typically targeted well-dressed women walking alone. If they happened to walk in a deserted and dark area, he would make his move. A few nights before encountering the victim, Liu Xiaochan walking on the road and turning into an empty alley, he attempted to approach her and rob her. However, before he could even open his mouth to deceive her or snatch her belongings, the woman immediately recognized the danger and started running while screaming for help. This startled and frightened Chi Yong Ning, who was afraid of being exposed. At the same time, he felt furious, so he chased after the victim and attacked her until she fell down. Regarding the case of the married couple Cao Hongyang, Chi Yong Ning stated that around 9 p.m. that night, after wandering all day without successfully finding a target, he followed a person whom he thought would take a taxi or go shopping on the streets. By chance, he saw Liu Ngok Fen, a person returning home after work from a construction material store, and he followed her. When Liu Ngok Fen opened the door and took off her shoes outside her house, Chi Yong Ning quickly approached and demanded money from her. However, to his surprise, when he opened his mouth to make the demand, Liu Ngok Fen calmly replied that she would give him the money after entering the house. Perhaps because Liu Ngok Fen frequently participated in gambling, she thought that this man was a creditor, or a gambling winner whom she still owed money to, so she allowed Chi Yong Ning to enter her house. In Chi Yong Ning's thoughts at that moment, there was only one woman, so he wasn't too afraid. However, to his surprise, when he entered the house, he saw a tall man sitting on the bed holding a deck of cards. In the tense situation, he rushed forward and continuously attacked Cao Hongyang, causing the victim to die immediately. It was the first time Chi Yong Ning had killed someone, and in a panic, he didn't know how many stabs he had made. Then he turned around and saw Liu Ngok Fen crouching on the floor in horror. He rushed forward and used a knife to kill Liu Ngok Fen, who collapsed right next to her husband's body. This was the first time Chi Yong Ning committed robbery and murder, so he immediately felt very afraid. He didn't thoroughly search the items in the room, but quickly rummaged through them to check if he could find any cash. Then he found a mini wallet belonging to the victim and took away 1,800 yuan along with some loose bills that fell out, but he didn't pick them up and hastily fled. He wore white fabric gloves, so he didn't leave any fingerprints at the crime scene. After completing his first crime, Chi Yong Ning quickly carried out his second robbery and was extremely brutal in killing a 33-year-old woman on the street. This time he didn't wear his glasses like before because his nearsightedness was mild. The subsequent investigation revealed that Chi Yong Ning's dagger completely matched the type of weapon that caused the wounds on the three victims' bodies. His brand name Li Ning shoes also matched the shoe prints left at the crime scene, which were stained with blood. These further corroborated the confession of this murderer. Finally, Chi Yong Ning was sentenced to death for his crimes. Throughout his over 40 years of life, he had been imprisoned twice for theft. He never married, and even his parents were completely disappointed in him. Chi Yong Ning's only goal was to make money unlawfully and foolishly through robbery. Although he successfully carried out his first crime without being discovered, he quickly ran out of money, so he planned for the next crime. This case only signifies a person who is idle and useless to society, a murderer who ruthlessly took 3 lives. Chi Yong Ning's crime was only worth 1,800 yuan, but he sacrificed his own life, which is everything he had earned, while killing 3 people. Some people believe that he may have a disorder characterized by impulsive and harmful behavior towards oneself or others. The signs of this disorder include rage, kleptomania, and uncontrolled violent behavior. This is evident in the details when Chi Yong Ning thought that there was only Liu Ngok Fen in the room and conveniently planned the robbery. However, when he opened the door, he unexpectedly saw Cao Hongyang inside, which frightened and panicked him. A typical thief in that situation would feel uneasy and choose to flee instead of attacking and killing both victims like he did. Even Chi Yong Ning's attack on Liu Xiaochan in the narrow alley on Khan School Street was very clear. When the victim cried for help and ran away, he chased after her and stabbed her in front of a pawn shop before hastily fleeing without taking anything. It seems that his attacking behavior was just an unexpected reaction when confronted with an unforeseen factor that triggered his frenzy and increased his anger. Chi Yong-ning received the death penalty, which was a fair and just punishment. It's unfortunate for the people who were killed in this murder case. They became unlucky victims of Chi Yong-ning. How do you feel about today's case? Leave a comment so we can discuss. And if you liked it, don't hesitate to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to support us. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.